Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
I will introduce our next speaker, Mr. Michael Lee, who is a master creativity and innovation coach. He is the founder of Innotivity Institute. I think I said that right, Michael. Are you there? Hi, Michael.
You did say it right, yes.
Okay. Michael
Well
Lee has a thank you. So Michael Lee has a unique background combining a lifetime of experience as a creative professional with expertise as a creativity educator and trainer. He has decades of experience in the film and TV industry in Africa, Europe, and the USA. He is the co-founder of Johannesburg's Academy of Television and Screen Arts. After graduating from Stanford with a BA and MA in political science, he worked with Castle Rock Pictures before moving to Prague, where he co-founded the international literary magazine Trafika. He is currently producing and writing adaptations of 3 South African novels for the screen. Michael is an internationally accredited Master of Creativity and Innovation Coaching, Master NLP Practitioner, Thought Leader Coach, and Abundance Coach. Welcome to today's presentation, Michael.
Thank you. This is really cool. It's a very different kind of space than I'm used to speaking in. But spirituality is so important, that it's great to have this opportunity. And some of the speakers have been really amazing. Alessia, I don't know where you are, but I'm in Johannesburg too. So I hope you're driving safely. But so, yeah, let's get started. I'd like to get everybody to basically deal with this concept that's sitting here behind me on the background, which is what is the source of creative inspiration? And a lot of people have the thought that there is a one source. So let's have a look at that today, right? I mean, I'm imagining that most people raise their hand if I say, do you want to be more creative? Most people would raise their hand. Would you? I can only see a few of you, but even Edmund, who's already a creative genius and inspirer and comedian. So if you put your camera on just for a second, if you could, and raise your hand if you'd like to be more creative and more inspired, if you feel like more inspiration is needed to be more creative. Right, so when we're talking about the source of creative inspiration, what's the question? What are we really asking? We only have a short time together, right? I could probably go on for this for hours, but I want to make a fairly simple and direct point by the end of this, but it's going to take a few steps, kind of like breathing, right? So like we've done a few times today and probably on many other days, I'd like you to breathe. All of us are breathing all the time, but we might not notice it. When we meditate, when we take active practice of breathing, we start to pay attention. So whatever type of breathing works for you right now, I'd like you to start just by breathing. I'm going to talk while you breathe. I'll also be breathing, but you have an advantage because you don't have to talk. You can just breathe. So if you could just start breathing in and out, in. Don't do it at a pace that I'm giving you. Use your own pace, right? Just in and out. We're going to start a conversation. This is not a full conversation. Not a full conversation. Just the beginning of a conversation. We only have a few minutes here, right? But it's a conversation you will continue later. I'm sure of that. You keep breathing, right? In and out. Be conscious of the breath. Again, I don't want to dictate your timing, so just breathe in and out. You will continue this conversation because it will become as automatic as breathing normally is once I raise these questions. Now, Ma, I had asked you off screen before if you could do some of that 428, 438 hertz singing for us while I'm talking, just this beginning part at least. Could you do a little bit of that? That would really help us as well. So here's the thing, guys. Keep breathing. Keep breathing consciously. throughout this whole presentation. Another word for breathing, obviously, is inspiration, right? We know that. We know when we talk about spirituality and the word inspiration are the same root, they're the same thing. Spirit is inspiration. That's all very obvious. But let's distinguish for a moment between the idea of breathing, inspiration, and metaphor, inspiration, right? Like having ideas, being inspired. Let's call breathing inspiration something like small I inspiration. It's just that we breathe in, and the metaphorical inspiration something like a big I inspiration. And you're still breathing, right? See, what's less obvious to most people is that inspiration, the kind of inspiration we want, when you say you want to be more creative, that inspiration is as easy as breathing is. So the first thing we want to deal with is that question, right? People have this idea that somehow, inspiration is difficult. Being inspired creatively is hard work, but it's not. Any more than breathing is hard work. I mean, the fact is that right now you're focusing on your breathing, but most of the time you don't, right? So here comes to 432. Keep breathing in and out. Inspiration and expiration. Let's notice a few things about this, right? Number one, in the beginning. The Bible says in the beginning, and Edmund, you shared this earlier. The Bible says that in the beginning was the Word. And we often use that to talk about creativity and to talk about how, in the beginning is the Word, that's how you create. But there's a problem there. We forgot something. The Bible left something out. Before you can speak, you need to breathe. So obviously, in the beginning, there was inspiration. In the beginning was a breath. It's generally been accepted since the beginning of time that God, spirit, world, earth, galaxy, whatever it is, nature gives us our ideas, right? William Blake said, I do nothing, the Holy Spirit accomplishes all through me. Johannes Brahms said, the ideas flow in me from God. Johnny Cash, Man in Black, said creative people have to be fed from the divine source. Now, in most of history, creativity has been thought purely that way, right? Human beings could not create. It was impossible. In ancient Greece, art was called techne. What happened to Ma? She was doing such a nice thing and now she's gone. But anyway, in ancient Greece, art was called techne, right? That word was the root of our word technique, technology. It means making stuff. Art was making stuff. There was no word for create or creator. People couldn't do it. Right? Plato in the Republic actually wrote, will we say of a painter that he makes something? And the answer was, certainly not. He imitates. There was no such thing as humans being creative. Right? Nature created, God created, humans could not. They could only discover, not invent. So that resistance to the idea that humans could create came from at least three different places. One, basically what we just said, that the only one that could create was God. The second one, that creation is mysterious. We don't know how to do it, so how could we do it? And the third thing, which was already kind of falling apart, was that rules, right, were designed by us, and therefore we could follow rules, but we could not be inspired to create something new. So if we started with breath, instead of the idea that there's a word to make, we already know that the inspiration is where creativity starts. For most of history, it was believed that only came from God. We're going to look at that a little bit as we go through here. Right? Are you still breathing? I mean, of course you are, right? But are you paying attention? So the Bible, for some reason, skipped that part. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, but where was the breath? Right? So that's the number one first thing we want to be clear about, is that in the beginning, before anything becomes creative, in the beginning is the inspiration. Okay? Here's the second thing. Inspiration's automatic, right? Try not to breathe. Just stop breathing. Just hold your breath. Now you can do it, right? But what do you start to notice? It's not really pleasant. It's automatic to breathe. Anybody know what the world record for the longest holding your breath is? guy named Alex Segura, a free diver. 24 minutes, 3 seconds. Can you hold your breath for 24 minutes? Probably not. Most people, at about 2 minutes, it becomes super uncomfortable, right? After 5 or 6 minutes, your body goes into shock, usually, and you go unconscious, forcing you to breathe. So if you try to hold your breath to the point that your body can't take it anymore, your body will knock your consciousness out. Like that question we just had, what is conscious? It'll knock your consciousness out because unconsciously you will breathe. Breathing is automatic. Inspiration is automatic. And yet we struggle to be inspired, right? You said at the beginning you'd like to be more creative, you'd like to be more inspired, but it's automatic. So there's another great quote from a writer named Jack London, American writer from about 100 years ago. He said, you can't wait for inspiration to happen. You have to go out after it with a club. And I always used to love that quote because it sounds so powerful. But when you think about it, you actually can wait for it to happen. You can also wait for breathing to happen. But we all know also as spiritual people that when you focus on your breathing and put attention to it and practice meditation and practice breathing, it works better. Here's the third thing. And Ma is back, thank you. So the third thing is this. Not only is inspiration automatic, but it automatically creates. Right? If you'll think about this section, you notice pretty quickly that when you breathe out, the next thing that happens is what? Sorry, when you breathe in, the next thing that happens is what? I gave it away. You have to breathe out, right? Yes, I mean, it goes in, but then after that, eventually you have to breathe out, right? In fact, if you don't, it starts to get really upsetting and painful. So not only is breathing in automatic, breathing out is also automatic. Eventually, it's impossible to hold your breath. Even that guy, Alex, who's held his breath for 24 minutes, that at some point he starts to have to breathe. You have to exhale. If you don't exhale, the inspiration becomes damaging. So inspiration is pointless if you don't breathe out. Therefore, inspiration automatically creates a result. Inspiration automatically makes you creative. Breathing in automatically creates. See, one of the basic laws about creativity is that most people aren't creative or need to be more creative. But people are all born creative, and that's a scientific fact. It's been studied. People are born equally creative. What happens is we put stuff in the way of it. And I can go on for a long time about how that works and how school is part of it and how society is part of it. And most of it's about the self, though. Most of it is about the blocks we put in the way of the creativity that naturally flows through us. Right? So inspiration should automatically give us a result, but something gets in the way of our breathing. Just try saying this. Just say, let go. Say it, let go. Let go. So interestingly, when you say the word let go, the first sound you make is at the top of your palate, which is a acupressure point, which releases pressure that you might have in your body by saying the word let go. Right? We block our creativity the same way we block our breathing. I'm so glad she's back. So here's the next thing, guys. You're still breathing. You've all said let go. Here's the next thing. Inspiration feels great, doesn't it? Like being inspired, that big I inspiration, right? That feels great. And so does the little I inspiration. Breathing feels good too, right? Of course it does, because we're cleansing our body. We're mixing fresh nutrients with our body, mostly oxygen, nitrogen. We're expelling the waste, right? It cleanses us. Cleansing feels good. Now here's another way we can apply this to being creative, right? Creativity feels good, doesn't it? When you do stuff that's creative, you feel good. You enjoy it. And part of the problem when we don't enjoy it is we start to judge the stuff that comes out, right? How many people look at what you do when you're being creative and say, not so good? Right? Yes? Raise your hand if that's happened to you. You do creative stuff and you say, not so good. So here's the difference, right? When you breathe out, most of the stuff coming out is not good. It's stuff you want out of your body, right? But the trees love it. I mean, you're taking the oxygen in, you're spitting out mostly carbon dioxide, and the trees need that from you. So even though you're spitting out what's to you poison or toxin and not something good, you're actually doing a favor to the world. Right? You're helping the world by breathing out. Now, most successful creative people know that most of what they do creatively is a waste. Right? Me as a writer, 80% of what I write, I have to rewrite. Me as a filmmaker, most of what I've shot has never been seen by anybody except the editor. Right? And if you're a creative person or you do creative work, you know that most of it's like that. So there's no problem being upset by that. It's natural, right? As Hemingway said, and this is, you know, his words, not mine, the first draft of anything is shit. You breathe shit out. It's not good for your body. But in there is nutrients and things that are important. It feels good. And so does creativity. So the next thing you want to notice is this. Inspiration is a cycle, right? Output, input. You cannot breathe out until you breathe in. You cannot breathe in until you breathe out, right? So it is directly related. If you're holding your breath for that 24 minutes or the 6 minutes or the 2 minutes that you're able to, you can't breathe out until you release your breath. So creating is only possible after you've been inspired, right? But here's the thing. Being inspired is only possible after you're being creative. You can't just be inspired and inspired and inspired. You have to breathe in and breathe out. Meaning, another thing here, that inspiration is a collaboration. Where does breathing start? Does breathing start inside us? Or does breathing start outside there, right? Does breathing force the air in, or do we pull it in? So it depends how you look at it, doesn't it? I mean, if you think about it, it seems balanced, right? You're not quite sure. Are you breathing it in, or is it forcing itself in? Because if you try to hold your breath, eventually it will force itself in. So most of the time we're trying to control our breathing. We think we're the source of our breathing, but actually it seems to be a balance, a collaboration between us and something else. What we do know is that holding your breath for too long is hard. It's impossible. At some point you will pass out and the air will force itself into you. So unless you really pay attention, you don't even notice you're breathing. Is that because maybe something else is breathing you? And the bigger question is, does it even matter? Inside the body and outside the body both participate. It's a collaboration. That's what creativity is too. It's a collaboration between us and the outside. So all those quotes at the beginning we talked about how people are saying God brings the creativity to us. You know, how it comes from outside us. How the Greeks said that creativity was something that only God could do and humans couldn't. I mean, that's changed a lot. Right? There's a lot of health benefits from creativity. Mental health benefits, physical health benefits. And that too I could go on for half an hour telling you what they are. Right? There's a much better quote, I think, from a guy named Amma, who's an Indian saint. He says, there's no difference between the creator and creation, just as there's no difference between the ocean and the waves. There is no difference between the creator and the creation, just as there is no difference between the ocean and the waves. And this is what we want to look at when we talk about what is the source of creative inspiration, right? Because really the question is this. Inspiration still remains a mystery. I mean, we can explain how our lungs work now. We have the science for that. We can explain that carbon and oxygen atoms are, but why do we breathe? Why is there air? You know? What about a planet that doesn't have the same air that's here? Can things still breathe? Is inspiration, small I, solved just because we know the data that goes into it? Any more than inspiration, big I, is solved about knowing how we become inspired to have ideas. The important thing is that the mystery's never been solved and probably never will. Right? Since the Renaissance, we've pretty much understood that creativity is something we create, that human beings generate creativity. And again, a long list of things I could go through that tell us all about how, different poets, different writers and so forth saw creativity differently. But in the Renaissance, we adopted the idea that human beings can be gods. And so that's the most really important last thing I want you to understand, is that we've gone through a few points about how inspiration works creatively. The bottom line of it is this: it's just breathing. Being creative is a form of breathing, and all the different ways we've looked at creativity, these different ways, ultimately add up to this. Ultimately, what are the sources of creative inspiration? I mean, there's really only two: inside me and outside me. Inside me and outside me. Breathe in. Now, you still doing it? So those of you who raised your hand said you'd like to be more creative, that's what you got to start with. Just breathe. Just breathe. The person after me is a very dear friend of mine, also in Johannesburg, Tu Nokwe. She taught me a lot about breathing, and she knows a lot about creativity, so I'm really looking forward to her talk. And I hope this has been useful for people. Thanks.